Let's start with good news.
Nobody answered. 7 in the morning. 6 directors sat around the table. Victor Langford stood at the head, waiting.
It's a simple sentence. Someone should be able to follow it.
Thomas Keene, director of technology, opened a folder.
The reservation system went down overnight. 27 hotels can't confirm new guests. How long? A little over 4 hours. What did you do during those 4 hours? We isolated the failure and moved part of the service to phone teams. We found an emergency server. But protocol requires your authorization to hire it. Waive all change fees until the system is back. No guest will pay for our delay.
Then he pushed the folder back across the table without opening it.
So you found a solution? I'm following protocol. And waited for my signature while 27 hotels stopped? A director wasn't hired to follow a problem all the way to my desk. He was hired to make decisions before the problem gets here. You centralized every emergency expense over $25,000 last quarter.
Victor tapped the small golden bell sitting on his desk. The short chime cut off the explanation.
Stop by HR, then clear your desk. You're firing me because I asked for the authorization you made mandatory? I'm firing you because you had 4 hours and you're still explaining why you didn't solve it.
Not a single executive said a word. Some lowered their eyes. Mason Vale, the chief financial officer, merely adjusted the cuffs of his shirt. Thomas walked out. Victor stood up.
Starting today, no report ends with a problem. If you enter this room with bad news, bring a solution already underway. Otherwise, you're not informing me. You're transferring responsibility.
Even Emily understood part of that logic. No one should bring a problem to the executive board without trying to find a way out. The catch was that Thomas had brought a solution, and he had been fired anyway. Emily Carter was starting her first day as Victor's secretary. After 4 years out of the job market, this was the very first company to offer her a fresh start. She needed to make it work. Her phone vibrated 3 times in her hand. The reservation system was still offline. Water was leaking straight through the ceiling of the ballroom where a wedding was scheduled for that evening, and the hotel chain's largest corporate client had just canceled 400 bookings. Victor noticed the phone in her hand.
I hope you understood my rule.
Perfectly, sir.
Emily looked toward the door. Thomas had just walked through. On her desk sat a green folder with the word growth printed on the cover. She opened it and tucked the 3 messages inside. Perfectly, Mr. Langford. What do we have for this morning? She looked down at the alerts. Demand has temporarily exceeded our system capacity. Customer service is already being redirected to a dedicated backup network. Victor gave a nod. Go on. The main ballroom has been given the opportunity to undergo a thorough inspection before the next event. Mason narrowed his eyes. And tonight's wedding? Emily still didn't have the slightest idea. It will be moved to the Winter Garden to provide a much more exclusive experience. She slid her finger down to the 3rd message. As for the 400 reservations, our sales team just gained immediate availability to accommodate new clients. Victor smiled for the first time. You see? It wasn't that hard. Emily closed the green folder. Now she just had to turn everything she had just invented into reality. Mason placed another green folder on her desk. Excellent debut, Miss Carter. Thank you. I haven't decided yet whether I passed. Mason swapped her temporary badge for a black keycard. Access to all 27 hotels. You won't solve problems by asking for permission at every single door. An act of kindness? Efficiency. The secret is never altering the numbers, only their emotional temperature. Inside the folder's divider tabs, drop-in occupancy had become room for growth. Delayed renovations was now labeled planned improvements. Is this a report or a motivational quote book? Every single report goes through you before reaching Mr. Langford. Filter out anything that doesn't help. Highlight what he can repeat to the investors, and schedule a meeting with Meridian Grand on tomorrow's calendar. Preliminary discussion. No need to mention it to the rest of the board. About what? A potential growth opportunity. Mason walked out before Emily could ask another question. She looked down at the green folder. Don't judge me. You need this job too. Does the folder usually talk back? The question came from the doorway. A man stood holding a report covered in bold red pen markings. "Only when it has something positive to contribute," she replied. "Then it's going to stay completely silent today." He took a step forward toward Victor's office. Emily stepped directly into his path, blocking the way. "Do you have an appointment?" "I have 27 hotels with no digital reservations and a wedding without a ballroom." "Neither of those is an appointment. You're the new secretary, and you're remarkably observant for someone planning to march into that office carrying 40 pages of bad news." Daniel Whitaker, Director of Operations. Emily glanced down at the report in his hands. "For now." Daniel almost smiled. "You just told the CEO that the wedding is being moved to the Winter Garden." "Excellent. We already have a decision. The Winter Garden is reserved for a corporate luncheon. Then we also have an obstacle. There are 280 guests. We have a number. The bride is arriving at the hotel in 40 minutes. And now we have a deadline. Look how productive this conversation is turning out to be." Daniel set the report down on her desk. "You announced a solution before checking if it was even possible." "I announced the destination. You're going to help me find the path." "And why would I do that?" Emily pointed straight at Victor's office door. "Because your alternative is walking in there and explaining to him that the ballroom is taking on water through the ceiling." Daniel looked over at the closed door. "You learn fast. I need the job. That doesn't turn bad news into good news. No, but it can buy us time to fix it." June Park appeared carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "My mother used to say a closed door never stops the wind from blowing in. Is that an old Korean proverb?" "No. My mother worked in hotels. She knew guests always find another entrance. One of you has far too many problems. The other has far too many adjectives. Maybe together you can manage to make one balanced person. She promised a winter garden that isn't even available. Then you two better leave right now. The bride has called 3 times, and on the last one she started calling me sweetheart. Is that bad? My name is clearly printed on my name tag. When a guest replaces your name with sweetheart, their patience has officially run out." Daniel picked up his report. "The car is waiting downstairs." Emily pressed the green folder against her chest. "Let's go save a wedding. First we need to find a ballroom." "Mr. Whitaker, that sounded dangerously close to bad news." June watched the 2 of them head toward the elevator. "My mother also used to say 2 stubborn people always get further down the road." Emily turned around. "Was that one real?" "No, but you're already running late." The elevator doors slid shut. Inside Victor's office, Mason placed a document on the desk. "Meridian Grand is interested in a quiet partnership. It could be exactly the boost we need." Victor reviewed only the first page. Every single figure was highlighted in green. "Set up the meeting." Mason gathered the papers. On the very next page, a clause allowed Meridian to convert the partnership into equity in the company if Langford missed a single financial target. And on that morning, no one in the CEO's office intended to bring him the news that one of those targets was already hanging by a thread. The 20-minute cab ride to Michigan Avenue showed that Daniel's 40-minute estimate had been optimistic. When they stepped through the brass revolving doors of the Grand Langford, the majestic flagship hotel of the chain, the bride was already standing right in the center of the marble lobby. And she wanted to see the ballroom immediately. She arrived 26 minutes early, Daniel said as they moved between the classic columns of the entrance. "Excellent. We just gained 26 minutes of urgency. That doesn't mean what you think it means. Today it does." Claire Dawson was waiting alongside her mother, the wedding planner, and 3 large boxes of flowers. Her smile vanished the moment she caught sight of Emily's green folder and Daniel's marked-up report. "Which one of you is going to tell me why nobody is letting me into the ballroom?" Daniel opened his mouth. Emily touched his arm just enough to stop him. "I will." She didn't open the green folder. A pipe above the ballroom suffered a failure. The team shut off the water supply in that section, but the space won't be able to host your wedding today. Claire froze in place. "They told my fiancé it was just a quick inspection." "I was the one who authorized that version," Emily answered. "And it was a mistake. You deserve to know what happened and what we can do from here." Daniel slowly lowered the report in his hands. Claire looked over at her mother. My parents danced in that ballroom at their wedding. That was the whole reason we chose this hotel. Claire's mother touched her daughter's arm gently. Her father spent 6 months practicing for their father-daughter dance. He can only stand on his feet for the length of a single song. Emily didn't try to sugarcoat the sentence. Then we need to preserve that memory, even if the ceremony moves to a different room. Where? To the Winter Garden. Daniel cleared his throat. Which is currently occupied. Emily turned her head toward him. I was getting to the creative part. The Winter Garden was completely set up for a luncheon with 60 insurance company executives. There were display screens, blue folders, and a massive banner about administrative efficiency. Emily surveyed the room. Nothing celebrates true love quite like a presentation on cost-cutting. The luncheon starts in 1 hour, Daniel said. Where is the nearest conference room? 2nd floor. Half this size. How many people does it hold? 80. Then it isn't smaller. It's more exclusive. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Do you do this even when he isn't listening? I'm beginning to suspect it might be contagious. The manager in charge of the luncheon refused to budge until Emily offered the conference room, upgraded audio-visual equipment, and hotel room credits equal to the value of the booking. That's going to cost a fortune, Daniel murmured under his breath. Still less than refunding 280 guests, losing the wedding, and explaining the whole disaster to Mr. Langford. Fine, we move the luncheon. Was that an agreement? It was mathematics. I'll take it. That's the closest language to a compliment you speak. A staff member from the events team hurried in carrying 2 cables. The client's computers won't connect to the system in this room. Daniel looked over at Emily. Upgraded equipment? It looked upgraded when I promised it. Emily inspected the connections closely. I should have verified compatibility first. Yes. And does your kindness end there? No. I happen to know where the adapters are stored. Daniel called in screens and adapters over his 2-way radio. Minutes later, he handed the radio back to Emily. The mistake is fixed. What's the next order? Get those executives up to the 2nd floor before they realize they've been promoted to exclusive. He gathered the crew, divided up the tasks, and set the entire Winter Garden into motion. Tables moved out, flowers moved in. The corporate screens were replaced with sheer, elegant curtains, and the staff transferred every single object without pointing fingers or blaming anyone for the disruption. Emily watched as Daniel stepped in to help a young porter lift a heavy wooden crate. This is a 2-person job, he said. No wedding is worth throwing your back out for a week. Afterward, he lightly touched the old brass key tucked in his pocket. Good luck charm? A reminder. Of what? That hotels are made for people. The buildings just happen to stand around them. He went right back to work before Emily could answer. June called. Mr. Langford wants an update, June reported. Emily watched Daniel directing the transformation. Tell him the wedding will be receiving an exclusive experience in the Winter Garden. And what's the real truth? The truth is carrying tables at this very moment. June let out a quiet sound of approval. My mother used to say a wedding is like a hotel. Everyone notices the flowers, but everything works because someone remembered the plumbing. Did she really say that? No. My mother had far more respect for weddings. Before noon, the Winter Garden already looked as if it belonged entirely to Claire. The crew discovered in storage the original brass plaque that had marked the entrance to the historic ballroom for decades. Daniel had it mounted right beside the dance floor. When Claire saw the Langford family initials gleaming among the floral arrangements, she brought both hands to her mouth. That was the exact plaque in my parents' wedding photograph. The ballroom couldn't come here, Emily said. So we brought a piece of it to you. Claire took both of Emily's hands in hers. Thank you for telling me the truth. Daniel listened from a few steps away. When Emily asked what the next task would be, he handed her the master operations sheet. You decide the order. She took the paper from his hand. Was that an expression of trust? Don't get used to it. The Winter Garden was completely ready when a technician hurried in looking for Daniel. We have to shut down the power on this side of the hotel while we inspect the section directly above the ballroom. Daniel checked his watch. The ceremony begins in 50 minutes. The job could take an hour and a half. The lights clicked off. Emily stood surrounded by 200 chairs, hundreds of fresh flowers, and a bride who had only just started smiling again. Daniel turned to face her. "I'm waiting for the optimistic spin. We just hit our all-time energy conservation target." "Don't you dare say that around Victor." Emily pulled out her phone. "Where does the hotel keep the backup lighting for outdoor events?" Daniel pointed down the service corridor. "You really did work in operations." "Then help me find the lights." They tracked down battery-powered uplights, string lights, and garden lanterns. The crew spread them throughout the plants, across the tables, and along the entire aisle of the ceremony. When Claire walked in, the glass ceiling reflected soft, shimmering points of light. It didn't look like an improvised fix at all. It looked like an intentional, breathtaking design choice. Victor received a photo and replied with a single text. "Excellent sustainable concept." Daniel showed his screen to Emily. "He genuinely believes it. That's our only piece of bad news that doesn't require any translation." During the first dance, Claire and Michael glided past the antique brass plaque while her parents watched from the edge of the floor. On the next song, Claire's father walked slowly into the garden and offered his hand to his daughter. He danced with her right in front of the plaque for the span of a single song, exactly as he had promised. Emily stood at the back of the garden, her sleeves still damp from the earlier work. Daniel handed her a neatly folded towel. "You were right. Could you repeat that? The sound of pure happiness is a little too loud." "The solution worked." "That wasn't quite what you said, but I'll make sure to record it that way." They stood side by side while Claire danced. Their shoulders were nearly brushing. A staff member stepped between them. "Mr. Whitaker, should we keep collecting the water in the old ballroom, or can we start calling it an indoor water feature?" Daniel glanced over at Emily. "Don't even think about it. I didn't say a single word. Your face just drafted an entire executive memo." Later that evening, when the final guest had left the garden, Daniel led Emily down to the maintenance office. He placed on the workbench the work order for the pipe, a photograph of the rusted old part, and the marked-up report he had been carrying since early morning. "This replacement was approved 3 separate times and postponed 3 separate times," he said. Emily examined the most recent document. The maintenance was listed as completed. The invoice was marked as fully paid. In the financial authorization box was a familiar name: Mason Vale. Daniel set the photograph of the pipe right next to the invoice. Today's crisis should never have happened. The company already paid to fix it. Emily closed the green folder without putting the document inside. The first piece of news she refused to polish into something positive carried the signature of Mason Vale. Emily left the hotel that night, searching for any innocent explanation for a paid pipe that had never been replaced. By 7:10 the following morning, Emily had come up with 3 possible explanations. Daniel dismantled every single one in less than a minute. "System glitch," Emily suggested. "The authorization bears Mason's signature. The contractor might have logged the wrong part number. The photograph clearly shows the old corroded pipe. Maybe someone mixed up the ballrooms." Daniel pointed to the serial number stamped onto the pipe and then to the exact same number printed on the invoice. "You turn problems into possibilities, not into impossible coincidences." Emily closed the green folder. "Then we asked Mason directly. We tell Victor? We ask first, with proof in hand." "You mean without getting fired before our morning coffee?" "You see, you're already learning my language." Before heading to corporate headquarters, they crossed the lobby of the Grand Langford. A familiar voice stopped them in their tracks. "Mr. Langford, the system claims I have never stayed here before." An elderly woman with soft white hair stood before the front desk. Victor remained by her side, without his golden bell, without his desk, and without a single director looking on. "The system is mistaken, Mrs. Bell. You and Mr. Bell stay in room 814 every single year. Ever since our 20th anniversary." Victor turned to the front desk receptionist. "Remove the inspection hold from 814. Black tea at 4 o'clock, 2 extra pillows, and absolutely no lavender." Mrs. Bell smiled warmly. "Your grandfather remembered too. He was the one who wrote it down. I simply had the good sense not to throw the index card away." Victor handed her the key card and only then noticed Emily and Daniel standing nearby. "I hope you two are bringing me good news." Emily held up the invoice. "We are currently aligning our financial records with the true operational condition of the hotels." Daniel tilted his head. "The pipe is still old." Victor pointed at him. "She was doing so well. My office, 8:30. Bring Mason with you." The 3-block walk to the glass-walled corporate headquarters tower took place in tense silence. Inside the executive building, the private elevator reserved for directors was stuck between floors. Daniel read the yellow maintenance sign. "We have a vertical staircase currently in a period of reflection." Emily snapped her head toward him. "Don't ever do that again. I said exactly what you would have said." Without any elegance, that was practically bad news. At 8:30, Mason walked into Victor's office accompanied by Leah Brooks, a young financial analyst clutching a thick spreadsheet against her chest. Emily laid the invoice and the photograph flat on the desk. "Why does the system display this work order as completed?" Leah opened the spreadsheet. "I closed out the order after receiving an instruction to—" "The accounting classification went through my office," Mason cut in smoothly. "If there is an inconsistency, the responsibility rests entirely with me." Leah looked over at him. "Mr. Vale, I can explain what happened. There is no need for you to take the blame for a decision above your pay grade. Head back to work. I will correct the ledger entry myself." Victor gave a satisfied nod. That is how a true director protects his team. Mason waited until Leah had left the room. The renovation budget was reallocated to cover temporary cash flow shortages at the Lake Shore property. The work order should have been marked as postponed, not completed. "I will have it updated before noon." "And the paid invoice?" Daniel asked. "A standard closing entry." The vendor refunded the amount as a credit line when the project was pushed back. The money never left the company. But it never reached the ballroom either. "Director Whitaker, if you intend to accuse someone of misconduct, choose an accusation that the documents actually support." Emily had walked into the room prepared to confront him. When Mason promised the correction before noon, her next question remained trapped behind her teeth. Victor pushed the folder across the desk in her direction. "Starting today, all directors will present their reports to Miss Carter before stepping into this office. I want problems accompanied by clear solutions." Mason smiled at Emily. "Congratulations on the promotion without a title change. My absolute favorite. All of the responsibilities and none of those awkward conversations about a salary raise." Out in the hallway, Daniel waited until the heavy door clicked shut. Mason didn't protect Leah. He took the blame right in front of the CEO and cut her off before she could finish her sentence. Emily looked down the corridor toward the finance department. "You have 24 hours to investigate each issue and prepare a viable solution. After that, I will make Victor listen to both. We could call our operation the Secret Maintenance Service. I call it continued employment. Your plan name is far less exciting. My plan name pays the bills." June was waiting for them near the stairwell holding 2 mugs. "My mother used to say a very helpful man always knows where he hid the ladder." Emily took the warm coffee. "Was that one real?" "No, but Mason left here after midnight carrying an unmarked folder. He is usually the last one to arrive and the very first to find the exit." The black keycard Mason had given Emily opened the corporate financial archive. For hours, she and Daniel traced fund transfers between the different hotels. The money originally meant for the ballroom pipe had been routed to the Lake Shore to offset a steep drop in occupancy. There was zero evidence that Mason had pocketed a single dollar for himself. There was also no logical explanation for why he had buried that reallocation inside a completed construction work order. As the building began to empty out for the evening, Daniel returned, carrying 2 plastic-wrapped sandwiches from the vending machine. "We have indecisive chicken and overconfident tuna. Which one is still within its expiration date?" The vending machine prefers not to spread negativity. Emily reached for the chicken. Daniel pulled up a chair on the other side of the table and rolled the old brass key between his fingers. "I started working here as a bellhop when I was 19 years old. This key unlocked the very first guest room they ever let me open by myself." "And you kept it for 23 years?" It reminds me who I was before boardroom meetings started deciding who I'm supposed to be. Emily creased the plastic sandwich wrapper. I used to be a regional operations manager. I turned around 2 failing hotels that were losing corporate accounts and trained staff across 4 major cities. Then why take a secretarial role? I spent 4 years taking care of my father and helping him regain his independence. When I tried re-entering the market, interviewers only saw the 4-year blank space on my resume. Nobody bothered asking about what came before it. Daniel spotted the faded expiration stamps on the back of the packaging. He slid the tuna, which was fresher, across the table to her and kept the chicken for himself. Competence doesn't vanish just because it was put to use outside an office building. Try telling that to the hiring managers. I don't know your hiring managers. I can say it to you. Emily didn't answer right away. She simply unwrapped the sandwich he had traded. At 7:43 in the evening, she uncovered a deleted calendar invite in the executive scheduling log. Mason had booked a private dining room at the Meridian Grand Restaurant. The name of the other attendee appeared in the recovered text message. Vanessa Cross. The dinner was scheduled to begin in 17 minutes. 17 minutes was not enough time to formulate a comprehensive plan. However, it was plenty of time to cross 4 city blocks, enter the flagship property of Langford's fiercest competitor, and discover that neither Emily nor Daniel knew how to appear casual. "Walk a little slower," Emily said as they stepped into the Meridian Grand. "We have 9 minutes. Casual people don't count the minutes. Casual people also don't tail the chief financial officer to a clandestine dinner. We aren't following anyone. We are simply verifying an administrative calendar discrepancy." That was a lie with a corporate badge pinned to it. They took 2 seats at the lobby bar, angled directly toward the glass doors of the private restaurant area. A bartender approached them with menus. "Are you expecting anyone else tonight?" "No," Daniel answered flatly. Emily gave the bartender a polite smile. "What he means is that our meeting hasn't been confirmed yet. We don't have a meeting." "Thank you so much, Mr. Whitaker." The bartender set down 2 glasses of ice water and stepped away before Daniel could improve the situation any further. Mason appeared at the entrance of the private room at exactly 8 o'clock. Vanessa Cross was already waiting inside. He set down on the table the unmarked folder June had spotted the previous night. When Mason opened it, Daniel leaned forward just enough to make out the titles across the first 2 pages. Assignment of debt, Lake Shore. Assignment of debt, Harbor Point. Meridian is buying up the debt on our hotels, he whispered under his breath. Mason said Vanessa wanted to invest in the chain. First she buys out the creditor's position. Then she offers the buyout on her own terms. Vanessa pointed her pen at a column in the ledger. Mason gave a reply that the soundproof glass prevented them from hearing. Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. "Please tell me this is socially acceptable news," she whispered as she answered. It was June. "The reservation system has completely crashed. The hotels can't check room status, modify bookings, or confirm arrivals. And the holiday weekend starts tomorrow morning." Daniel was already on his feet. Emily watched through the glass as Mason closed the folder. "We saw that Meridian is buying up 2 separate hotel debts. And we have 27 properties that could lose every holiday booking tonight." She left her water glass untouched on the sleek bar counter of their rival's hotel. "We're going back to Langford." The swift trek back through the illuminated streets of downtown Chicago brought the 2 of them back to the Grand Langford within minutes. Before 9 o'clock that evening, the large conference room on the 2nd floor was converted into an emergency operations call center. Emily organized the tables by region, handed out printed master room sheets, and instructed each property to transfer their holiday booking data via secure spreadsheets. In the center of the room, as maintenance workers ran heavy-duty extension cords along the carpeted floor, Daniel placed his phone on speaker in the middle of the table and dialed Thomas Keene. The phone rang twice. "Daniel." Thomas answered, his voice emerging from the quiet of his apartment. "The system went down for good." "That still doesn't sound like an apology. I need the contact info and access protocols for the emergency backup server you tracked down this morning." The rapid clacking of keyboard strokes echoed over the speakerphone. I'm sending you the secure link and administrator credentials right now. Overnight enterprise support is $18,000. Daniel glanced over at Emily above the towering stack of printouts. Well below the $25,000 executive sign-off threshold. You remember the protocol, she said without pausing her sorting of the guest lists. I remember why Thomas lost his job. The phone vibrated against the table as the file transfer notification popped up on the screen. Thomas, Daniel called out softly. Thank you. The solution was never the part that was missing. The call disconnected. Daniel slid the phone into his pocket and turned around to face the assembled room. Let's get this server online. By 10 o'clock, 30 employees were taking guest calls over the phone. By 11 o'clock, there were 50. June arrived carrying fresh coffee, packs of colored sticky notes, and the unmistakable expression of someone who fully expected to find yet another crisis working past business hours. My mother used to say 50 phones ringing at the exact same time are still 50 good reasons to answer them one by one. Did she really say that? Emily asked. No. She would have unplugged the cord and brewed a pot of tea. A young front desk clerk raised her hand in the air. I guess just said she is going to hold me personally responsible if her room disappears from the system. Emily walked over to her desk. The room hasn't disappeared. The system has simply lost the ability to find it. Confirm her name on the master printout and do not apologize for a corporate decision that wasn't yours. And what if she stays angry? Transfer her straight to me. Daniel listened from across the room as he wired another desktop computer. Emily hadn't tucked that conversation into the green folder. Shortly after midnight, the temporary server began receiving its first batches of live data. For every single reservation restored, 2 brand new incoming calls lit up the switchboard. Good news, Daniel announced. Now we know precisely how many people are waiting on hold. Emily looked at the monitor. 184. I'm improving in your language. You still have a slight accent. At 2:20 in the morning, Emily rested her head against the green folder just to close her eyes for a moment. When she woke up, a suit jacket was draped gently over her shoulders and a hot mug rested beside her hand. Daniel stood before an open laser printer, working carefully to clear a stubborn paper jam. Emily pulled the suit jacket closer around herself. My folder accepted your jacket without requesting prior executive authorization. It showed good judgment for the very first time. Don't get ahead of yourself. It remains my most loyal employee. The printer finally released the crushed sheet of paper, leaving a dark smudge of black toner across Daniel's cheek. Got it, he said. Almost. Emily stepped closer and used the corner of a clean tissue to gently wipe away the black mark near his cheekbone. Daniel stood completely still. Is it still there? He asked quietly. A little. She folded the tissue and tried again. When she lowered her hand, the 2 of them were standing far too close to consult any corporate spreadsheet. The temporary server kicked into full operation. 50 phones rang simultaneously across the room. Emily stepped back. That felt personal. Operating systems have a way of sensing danger. Daniel replied. By 6:40 in the morning, every single holiday reservation had been fully reconciled. The entire staff broke into applause as the final spreadsheet column turned green with a confirmed status. Emily took in the room, the empty coffee cups, and the exhausted team members who had worked straight through the night just to conceal another operational crisis from Victor. We solved it, Daniel said softly. And he will go right on believing there was nothing to solve in the first place. Before Daniel could reply, Victor strode through the double doors. Miss Carter, this is extraordinary. Personalized, white-glove customer service on a nationwide scale. Emily opened her mouth. Mason stepped in right behind him. I have even better news. Vanessa Cross is here and wishes to discuss a strategic growth partnership this morning. Vanessa appeared in the doorway just as Emily was handing out fresh coffee to the weary staff. She recognized Emily instantly. Emily Carter. 2 major regional operational turnarounds and 4 years out of the corporate market. A professional with your track record shouldn't be serving coffee. Victor turned slowly toward Emily. What track record? Victor's question contained only 2 words. The answer encompassed 4 years of Emily's life and a distinguished career that this company had never bothered to learn about. Vanessa was the first to speak. Before taking time away, Emily managed regional operations. She turned around 2 struggling hotels and trained management teams across 4 cities. Victor looked over at Emily. "Why didn't you mention this?" "It was clearly stated on the resume I submitted to your company." Mason adjusted his shirt cuffs. "The opening we had available was for the executive secretarial role. And she needed an opportunity," Vanessa finished smoothly. "You managed to hire a seasoned director of operations for the salary of a receptionist." Daniel looked away to hide the trace of a smirk. Victor didn't look embarrassed in the slightest. He looked thoroughly pleased with himself. That simply proves that Langford recognizes extraordinary talent overlooked by the rest of the market. Emily looked back at the 50 exhausted team members who had spent the entire night taking emergency phone calls. Recognizes it? Under which job title? Victor brushed the question aside. "You will join our executive dinner with Mrs. Cross tonight. I want her to see firsthand how deeply we value exceptional professionals." "Does that include an official title adjustment? Let's not turn good news into an awkward human resources discussion." June handed Emily a hot mug. "My mother used to say some compliments come in huge boxes because there is nothing inside them." Victor furrowed his brow. "What did she just say?" "That dinner will be wonderful, Mr. Langford." At 7 o'clock that evening, the private dining room at the Grand Langford's fine dining restaurant was immaculate, bathed in the glow of crystal chandeliers overlooking the night lights of Chicago. Victor had his small golden bell placed right beside his dinner plate as a symbol of proud family heritage. Daniel paused in the doorway. "He actually brought the bell to dinner." "Some people bring flowers," Emily remarked. "Others bring interruption devices." June had set an extra place between Victor and Daniel. On the place card, beneath Emily's name, was printed Executive Secretary. "Mason forgot your chair," June explained quietly. "I remembered. Thank you." June straightened the final fork. "A beautifully set table never turns a bad contract into a good one." "Your mother?" "Me. My mother didn't know contracts. She knew people who signed them without reading." Vanessa walked in, flanked by 2 advisors. Mason carried a green folder so overstuffed that the brass clasp couldn't snap shut. Victor gestured toward Emily. "Our specialist in turning challenges into expansion opportunities." Vanessa took her seat. A remarkably convenient skill given the current state of affairs. The first course hadn't even arrived before she got straight down to business. "Our market analysts noticed an unusual amount of room availability at the Lakeshore property." Daniel opened his operational ledger. Occupancy dropped 11% over the last 3 months. Victor tapped the golden bell. Emily chimed in before the ring faded. "The property maintains immediate capacity to accommodate major corporate group bookings." "Precisely," Victor chimed in. Vanessa looked over at the bell. "And what about Harbor Point? I hear it preserves a great deal of its original character, including several structural elements that should have been replaced years ago." Daniel answered. The golden bell chimed once more. "We are preparing a comprehensive renovation that will honor the historic identity of the landmark property." Emily translated. Daniel took a sip of water without taking his eyes off her. "I also heard about the new telephone customer service strategy," Vanessa continued. Victor beamed. "A nationwide personalized concierge campaign." Emily tightened her grip on the cloth napkin in her lap. "Improvised during a total system outage," Daniel stated plainly. Victor reached his hand out toward the golden bell. Vanessa lifted her wine glass before he could strike it. "That won't be necessary. I already understand the method." A dining room manager appeared behind Emily and spoke quietly into her ear. "The kitchen is falling behind. The executive chef needs a word with you immediately." Emily found the chef standing in front of a stainless steel counter covered with backlogged dinner tickets. 2 primary vendors suspended deliveries over overdue invoices, he explained flatly. "I will finish service for this dinner, but I am resigning my position the moment dessert goes out." "Did you tell Mason about this?" 3 times. In his executive summaries, it became an ongoing culinary vendor negotiation. Emily returned to the table just as the main course was finally served. Victor raised an eyebrow in inquiry. "Problem resolved?" "Our culinary department is about to welcome exciting new leadership possibilities. Daniel choked on his water. June, standing by the doorway, handed him a cloth napkin. Drink slowly. The truth goes down much easier that way. Vanessa made no effort to hide her amused smile. Following dessert, Mason opened the green folder. Vanessa laid an $80 million term sheet flat on the table. Immediate liquidity to stabilize the chain, overhaul the enterprise IT infrastructure, and complete all backlogged renovations, she explained. Victor skimmed the first page. Collateral? Emily asked. 3 flagship properties, Vanessa answered smoothly. The Grand Langford, the Lake Shore, and Harbor Point. Daniel closed his notebook with a soft thud. 2 of which are tied directly to the defaulted debt Meridian has been buying up. The golden bell chimed for the 3rd time. The finance team has already vetted all the terms, Mason insisted. We can move forward. Emily placed her hand firmly over the contract before Victor could flip to the final signature page. We need adequate time to examine the legal ramifications on corporate governance and voting control. Victor stared at her hand resting on the document. How much time? 48 hours. Vanessa retrieved the expensive fountain pen she had placed beside his hand. Not a problem. We can formalize the agreement at the upcoming company anniversary gala. Out in the corridor after dinner, Daniel waited until the door latched completely shut. You translated every single question until Vanessa knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that Victor has no clue what is happening inside his own company. I stopped him from signing away the company tonight. She already controls 2 major debts. And now we have 48 hours to figure out the rest of it. At some point, Emily, protecting your job and protecting this company are going to require completely different choices. She held his gaze without flinching. Do you really think I don't know that? I think you are far too brilliant to keep making his blindness feel comfortable. Emily glanced down at the brass key Daniel was turning over and over in his palm. Why is your opinion starting to matter so much to me? Daniel's hand went completely still around the key. Neither of them could find an answer that could ever fit neatly into an executive report. The elevator doors slid open. Vanessa stepped inside while rapidly typing a text message to Mason. Emily caught the words reflected in the polished metal surface before the doors sealed shut. He doesn't know anything. Prepare the conversion. Emily had caught only a single word in the elevator's reflection. Daniel needed only 1 sentence to turn Vanessa's $80 million into an existential threat. Conversion means she doesn't just want to collect on the debt, she wants to take over the company. The following morning, the 2 of them stood in front of the financial archive. Emily swiped Mason's black key card through the reader. The indicator light flashed red. Try it again, Daniel said. Emily swiped the card a second time. Red. Maybe the card reader is just protecting the sensitive documents from my personality. In that case, it should have flashed red yesterday. She looked over at him. You're developing a sense of humor. I'm working with very limited resources. Mason appeared at the end of the hallway carrying a sleek, gray leather portfolio tucked against his side. Can I help you with something? My access has been revoked, Emily replied. Your clearance covers routine operational summaries, not sensitive corporate transaction files. Victor ordered all department heads to submit their reports directly to me. An operational summary is not a proprietary ownership contract. Daniel placed his hand flat over the reader. What happens when Meridian converts the debt? Mason smiled without showing a single tooth. That question falls well outside your job responsibilities. Then, who does it belong to? Asked a commanding voice behind them. Margaret Langford wore a sharp navy blue tailored suit, an antique gold brooch, and reading glasses suspended from a delicate gold chain. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Mason squared his shoulders. Mrs. Langford, we were simply clarifying access parameters. Which door is it that you don't want them opening? A financial record room that requires proper executive clearance. Margaret turned her gaze directly onto Emily. Why do you want to get in? Because Meridian bought up the distressed debt on the Lake Shore and Harbor Point properties before ever offering capital to Victor. If the term conversion is tied to performance milestones, Vanessa can seize equity in our hotels the moment the chain misses those targets. Can you prove that? Not yet. The best answer I've heard in this building all month. Margaret slid off her reading glasses. The company anniversary gala takes place tomorrow evening. I want an independent report detailing the true operational health of both properties. Occupancy, delayed renovations, staffing, local vendor contracts, and long-term viability risks. Mason exhaled slowly through his nose. Operational audits typically run through the chief financial officer. That is precisely why I requested an independent one. She handed Emily an embossed card bearing the official seal of the board of directors. This opens the local property archives. It does not hand you a victory. Bring back enough hard facts to earn it. A 1-hour regional flight followed by 40 minutes of driving under gray Ohio skies brought them to the first property. By 2 in the afternoon, Emily and Daniel were walking through the doors of the lake shore in Cleveland. A tower of glass and gray granite where the official headquarters report claimed that occupancy had dropped due to seasonal adjustments. A yellow barrier tape blocked off the entire 4th floor. "How many guest rooms are out of service?" Emily asked the general manager. 46. Renovations were halted 3 months ago, and market demand. We have pending booking requests from 3 major local corporations. I cannot accommodate group contracts without those rooms. Daniel pulled up the hotel's raw ledger. So demand never dropped. Capacity was artificially throttled. I submitted that reality in 7 consecutive reports. Emily pointed toward a side office where 6 staff members were actively organizing corporate event pitches. What are they working on? A turnkey package to win back corporate accounts. Headquarters never approved it. Daniel read the top sheet: complimentary airport shuttles, express catered meals, and a dedicated executive co-working lounge on every floor. That came directly from our front desk team. The manager said proudly. Emily opened the green folder. I need complete line item costs, corporate client contact lists, and the realistic timeline to finish the 4th floor renovation. Did you come here to shut us down? I came here to find out why competent people are being treated like an accounting error. Another 25 miles of highway tracing the lakefront brought them to the second property. Harbor Point was the complete opposite of the Cleveland Tower. A grand, historic lakeside estate built of dark brick and rich timber, where the corporate report had promised meticulously preserved heritage. Yet right inside the grand event hall overlooking the waves, a large picture window was held shut only by the back of a wooden dining chair wedged against the frame. Daniel examined the chair. Ventilation with architectural character. Emily looked over at him. You are officially forbidden from speaking my language. I thought I was improving. You just delayed your imaginary promotion. The hotel's general manager laughed for the first time since their arrival. We have loyal families who return every single summer, corporate clients eager to host lakeside retreats, and a ready-to-launch proposal to utilize the smaller banquet room during renovations. Who rejected the proposal? Emily asked. Nobody rejected it. It simply never received a reply. At the very bottom of the local property archive, Daniel unearthed 2 formal legal notices sent by the previous lender. He handed the first one to Emily. Read the 3rd clause. Emily traced the printed lines with her fingertip. If the hotel chain misses its net cash flow targets for 2 consecutive quarters, the lender retains the right to convert a portion of the outstanding debt into voting equity. And Meridian bought out that lender's exact position. Vanessa isn't offering a bailout. Daniel shut the file folder. She is waiting for Victor to sign the surrender. Outside, a sudden storm rolling across the lake grounded all regional flights and shut down the local airports, canceling their return trip to Chicago. By 10 at night, as sheets of rain lashed against the tall leaded windows, Emily and Daniel found themselves stranded inside Harbor Point's quiet, dark-paneled library, surrounded by spreadsheets, employee recovery plans, and 2 rather unconvincing cups of black coffee. The laser printer in the corner sat motionless. I sent the print job 6 minutes ago, Emily said. Maybe it's reflecting on its career choices. Or perhaps it requested a transfer to an office with far fewer crises. Daniel arranged the printed sheets into 5 neat columns: fact, solution, cost, department lead, and implementation timeline. There's a real turnaround plan here, he said. Reopen the 4th floor in Cleveland, win back the corporate group accounts, and renovate Harbor Point in phased stages. The company still has wonderful hotels. and dedicated people who know how to save them. Emily closed a spreadsheet. Why did you stay? With your track record, you could have walked away long before things reached this point. Daniel turned the brass key between his fingers. When I was 19 years old, I had zero hospitality experience, no references, and not a single suit that fit properly. Langford gave me my very first job when nobody else would take a chance on me. And you've spent 23 years trying to repay that chance. I spent 23 years trying to protect the place that gave me one. Emily looked down at the green folder resting on the polished table. I used to think I only needed an open door. Then I discovered I still had to convince everyone that 4 years away hadn't erased everything that came before. They didn't erase anything. Victor sees an efficient executive secretary. Vanessa sees a competent manager who might prove useful to her. Mason sees someone who hasn't yet learned to stay in her lane. Daniel set the brass key flat on the table between them. I see you. Emily lifted her eyes to his. That is terrible news for someone trying to remain invisible. Daniel stood up. He took a single step and stopped directly in front of her, close enough that Emily had every opportunity to step back. She closed the green folder and tucked it behind her on the table. Daniel gently brushed the side of her face with the tips of his fingers. He paused, giving her time. Emily reached up and took hold of the lapel of his jacket. He kissed her. It was a tender, measured kiss, impossible to translate into any corporate report. When Daniel began to pull back, Emily was still holding onto his lapel. The printer whirred to life with a mechanical hum, dropping the first fresh sheet into the output tray. Both of them turned to look at the machine. 50 pages, Daniel remarked softly. It shows complete honesty at the worst possible moment. Sounds thoroughly qualified for the executive board. Emily released his jacket and gathered the warm stack of paper. Hard numbers, lender default clauses, and the turnaround strategy drafted by the frontline teams, she said. Everything Victor refused to hear, condensed into a single report. The very last page was an internal implementation timeline sent by Mason's office directly to the properties. Emily read the bottom line. Definitive signing. Tomorrow, 7 in the evening. They didn't have 48 hours after all. They had 21. At 7 in the evening, Victor was scheduled to sign the agreement he called salvation. Emily had 21 hours to prove that his signature would surrender far more to Meridian than just 3 hotels. We're driving back, Daniel said. You've been awake since yesterday morning. We can take turns driving. Emily pressed the green folder against her ribs. My driver's license expired while I was caring for my father. Daniel stared at her. You saved that piece of information until after suggesting we take turns? I was waiting for a leadership opportunity. You found it. You're in charge of the coffee. The storm had grounded flights, but the highways remained open. Shortly before midnight, the headlights of their rental car sliced through the rain-slicked highway as the dark waters of the lake faded into the distance behind them. During the drive back to Chicago, Daniel drove with regular coffee stops, while Emily transformed the passenger seat into a mobile operations office. By the time the distant glow of the Chicago skyline appeared on the horizon, 2 distinct presentations were ready on her laptop. One was titled Partnership for Growth. The other was titled Conversion Risk and Turnaround Plan. At 6 in the morning, June found the two of them stepping into the Grand Langford without looking at each other. She poured 2 mugs. My mother used to say that when 2 people avoid the exact same subject, the subject has already arrived ahead of them. Emily accepted the mug. Did your mother really say that? No, but you 2 arrived far too early to demand citations. In the second-floor conference room, Emily slipped the palatable presentation inside the green folder. She placed the unfiltered report right beside it, secured with a black binder clip. Daniel read the 2 cover pages. Which one does Victor see first? The green folder opens the dialogue. The real report explains the risk. The green folder makes Victor believe there is 0 risk. If I open with debt conversion, he fires me before we reach page 2. And if you open with growth, he signs before you ever reach the second folder. Emily shifted the unfiltered report to the side. I need to keep him listening. You always say that right before you help him avoid listening. Mason walked in carrying a tablet. and a carefully choreographed air of emergency. "Daniel, we need you at the airport property immediately. The main elevator has seized up, and guests are stranded on the upper floors." Daniel reached for his overcoat. Emily was already dialing the airport hotel on her cell phone. "Put it on speaker," Mason demanded. The general manager answered on the third ring. "The elevator resumed normal service 40 minutes ago," she reported. "The field technician is still on site doing a routine inspection. No guests were ever stranded." Emily looked directly at Mason. "Any other emergencies that have already been resolved?" "An executive director should always inspect these incidents in person. The technician's diagnostic log contains a digital signature and timestamp." "Daniel is staying right here at headquarters." Mason's eyes dropped to the coverless, clipped report. "That document was never authorized by the finance department. It was formally requested by the chairwoman of the board." "Then I certainly hope Mrs. Langford enjoys surprises." The moment he walked out, Daniel opened the clipped report. On the title page, beneath the bold header, there was only one name: Emily Carter, Executive Secretary. "You took my name off. If Victor reacts badly, there's no reason to take you down with me. You made that decision for me. I'm protecting your career. The same way you protect Victor from the truth." Emily snapped the green folder shut. "It isn't the same thing. It's always the exact same thing. You hide whatever might hurt someone, handle every crisis alone, and call it protection." She aligned the two folders neatly side by side on the table. "Today is not the time to hash out what happened in that library." Daniel slid the brass key back into his pocket. "That is your fundamental problem, Emily. It is never the right time for anything that might complicate your life." He pulled a pen from his jacket and wrote his own name back onto the title page right beneath hers. "I'm not letting you face Mason alone, but I'm also not going to pretend this choice hasn't pushed us apart." The day marched forward while the Grand Langford transformed for the gala. Commemorative anniversary banners draped the grand hall, elaborate floral arrangements filled the banquet tables, and the small golden bell took its place on the stage right next to the final contract binder. At 5 in the afternoon, hotel staff, investors, and longtime guests began filling the grand ballroom. Margaret occupied the central front table, observing the executive suite over her reading glasses anchored to their gold chain. At 6:42, Emily approached the master of ceremonies backstage. "How much time until the official contract signing?" 18 minutes. "We need 20 more. I suppose I could add a special tribute to our veteran staff members." June appeared out of nowhere, holding a clipboard with 42 names. "Don't worry, I brought full surnames and exact years of loyal service." The master of ceremonies went pale. "That will take half an hour. Gratitude requires thorough preparation." June answered. The tribute only reached the 11th name before Victor signaled to wrap it up immediately. Emily attempted to delay the signing further by calling for the ceremonial cake cutting. The pastry chef appeared in a panic without the cake. It was constructed with 2 grand towers and physically cannot fit through the double service doors. Daniel leaned in close to Emily. "The cake has the exact same problem as our executive board. Too much top-heavy structure? It doesn't fit where it actually needs to go." Victor called Emily over before she could reply. "I have 6 minutes. Show me the growth opportunity." Inside the private anteroom adjoining the stage, Emily opened the green folder. The hotel chain can recover its occupancy margins through phased renovations, localized corporate sales contracts, and the immediate reopening of 46 rooms in Cleveland. Victor nodded approvingly. "That is precisely what we need." Emily placed the unfiltered, clipped report squarely over the presentation. "But the Meridian contract incorporates a conversion clause that transforms distressed debt directly into voting equity. Our net cash reserves are hovering right at the default threshold, and Mason has actively concealed critical operational data you should have received months ago." Victor snapped the report shut without touching page 2. "Vanessa is offering immediate capital injection, protecting our brand heritage and preserving hundreds of jobs. You bring me an 11th hour legal theory and expect me to freeze everything." "It is not a theory. We uncovered the formal lender default notices. The finance department fully approved this transaction. The finance department is led by a man who negotiated behind your back with Vanessa. Victor's hand rested on the golden bell on the table. A true leader cannot allow every perceived risk to become a reason to retreat. Nor should a leader mistake walking off a cliff for courage just because moving forward looks bold. The golden bell chimed. I hired you because you saw possibilities, not because I needed another person telling me why things will fail. I brought you a comprehensive recovery plan. Then present the growth strategy and leave the corporate legalities to the financial experts. Emily kept her hand firmly planted on the report. And if I refuse? Mason will deliver the presentation himself. And tomorrow, you go back to managing my calendar, assuming there is still a desk available for you. From the ballroom, a swell of applause erupted. The master of ceremonies had just announced Victor's name. Emily had a split-second choice. She picked up both folders and followed him out. On stage, Victor spoke eloquently about tradition, mutual trust, and a fearless future. Vanessa pledged to honor the revered Langford name. Mason set the leather-bound contract directly in front of them. Emily stood motionless by the heavy velvet curtain, clutching the unfiltered report in her arms. Daniel stepped up beside her. Did you give him everything? He didn't make it past page 1. Which folder did he see first? Emily remained silent. Daniel looked down at the green folder in her hand. Victor signed. Hundreds of attendees broke into thunderous applause as Vanessa affixed her own signature. The golden bell was rung on stage as if heralding a historic victory. Mason's phone buzzed with an incoming text. Emily caught the preview on his screen before he tucked it away. Your position is secure. Daniel kept his eyes looking away from the stage. I don't blame you for his signature. It certainly feels like you do. I blame the choice to put the truth last. I cannot keep fighting by your side if, every time it truly matters, you tell the truth to wait out in the hallway. He walked away before Emily could assemble a comfortable version to reply. Vanessa appeared beside her, holding an untouched glass of champagne. Your report was entirely accurate regarding the conversion clause, she said in a quiet murmur. You only got the timeline wrong. Emily turned around. What timeline? The financial covenants have already been breached. At midnight tonight, Meridian gains the legal right to seize majority control of Langford. By 7:10 in the evening, Emily had finally run out of time to translate the truth into something comfortable. Thank you, she said to Vanessa. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. For what? For the very last piece of bad news I had to receive in secret. Emily crossed the crowded ballroom as guests continued clinking glasses in celebration of the signed agreement. She found Margaret seated at the head table and placed the unfiltered report directly in front of her. Did Victor read this? Margaret asked. He closed it before reaching page 2. Margaret opened the clipped document. And which folder did he receive first? Emily looked down at the green folder in her hand. The wrong one. Margaret rose from her chair. Special emergency board meeting at 9 o'clock. This time bring only one version. The ballroom stayed brightly lit, but the celebration lost half of its executive suite within minutes. While the live band played on the floor below, executive assistants moved briskly through the corporate hallways, gathering contracts, board packets, and digital access logs. Daniel met Emily outside the boardroom double doors. Margaret called everyone in, including Mason. He will have 2 hours to construct a defense. I gave him 4 days to build his accusation. Daniel observed the bulging green folder, so packed with paper that the brass snap couldn't meet the clasp. Is it going to hold? That has been the exact question everyone has been asking about me since Monday morning. June appeared pushing a wheeled beverage cart. My mother used to say that a late-night board meeting requires strong black coffee and short apologies. Did she say that? Daniel asked. No, my father gave very long apologies. She would have loved the quote. At 9 o'clock, Victor walked into the boardroom without his golden bell. June had already served steaming coffee to Margaret, Emily, and Daniel. Victor stared at the empty space on the mahogany table in front of his chair. And where is my coffee? All out. June replied smoothly. We are standing inside a luxury hotel. That is precisely why the situation is so alarming. June pulled the door shut from the hallway. Mason connected his laptop to the wall-mounted presentation display. Before Miss Carter makes any unsubstantiated accusations, the board needs to understand exactly how we arrived at this point. Emily's original polished memo appeared on the screen. Immediate capacity for new corporate groups. Right below it, Mason pulled up the raw operations report from the Lakeshore property. 11% occupancy drop. 46 guest rooms out of service. Victor turned his head toward Emily. Did you write that first sentence? I did. Mason advanced to the second comparison slide. Renovation honoring historic architectural identity. Construction suspended, windows and HVAC systems awaiting urgent repairs. Next came the nationwide personalized concierge campaign. Directly beneath it was the total reservation system outage. Mason brought up the final entry. New culinary leadership possibilities. A female board member adjusted her glasses. What did that actually mean? 2 primary food vendors cut off deliveries, and the executive chef resigned right after dessert, Emily answered plainly. The board member looked back at the glowing screen. That is an extraordinarily optimistic translation. Dessert was exceptional, Daniel remarked. Mason's expression hardened. For 4 straight days, Emily Carter tightly controlled every piece of information delivered to the chief executive officer. She actively concealed structural defects, operational losses, and severe contract defaults. Now she intends to blame the finance department for decisions made on the basis of her own sugar-coated memos. Victor kept his gaze locked on Emily. Is that the truth? She could have explained the paralyzing fear, the job she desperately needed, and the impossible corporate rule she had walked into on day 1. Instead, she popped the clasp on the green folder. Yes. I translated the problems. The scene gave way completely. Dozens of loose documents spilled across the polished mahogany table and scattered onto the floor. Urgent maintenance tickets, mass cancellations, delinquent vendor invoices, room assignment rosters, emergency purchase orders, and rejected employee initiatives. Daniel leaned down to pick up a stray ledger sheet. The folder finally resigned. Emily didn't flinch. I also documented the raw root problem, the emergency action taken, the exact cost, and the specific executive who was formally notified. She laid the first document directly in front of Victor. The wedding was saved because the frontline staff managed 280 guests without a functioning reservation system. She placed the second document down. The emergency server was brought online because Thomas Keene found a working solution before being fired for asking permission. The third page carried Mason's bold signature. The Lakeshore renovation was halted and the budget was diverted. Mason received the original engineering inspection. Mason folded his hands on the table. Receiving a report does not constitute concealing it. Emily held up another page. Here are the 3 formal kitchen alerts forwarded directly to your office. You turned them into ongoing culinary negotiations before I ever set foot in this company. Margaret reached out her hand. Let me see the dates. Mason removed his glasses and wiped the lenses with his handkerchief. None of these documents prove that I negotiated the control of Langford for personal gain. The text message guaranteeing your executive post proves Vanessa intends to reward you. Daniel countered. A text message you claim to have seen in passing but cannot produce. Victor surveyed the scattered documents across the boardroom table. For the very first time, he was seeing all the hidden crises that had been resolved far away from his office. His hand reached instinctively toward the golden bell, resting on a sideboard behind him. Don't ring it. Emily urged softly. His fingers hovered in midair. Listen all the way to the end. Just this once. Victor slowly withdrew his hand. Emily opened the clipped, coverless report. Meridian bought up our defaulted debt before ever offering fresh capital. The financial covenants have already been breached. The agreement signed tonight legally acknowledges the rights of the new creditor and expands collateral to include the Grand Langford. At midnight, Vanessa will be legally entitled to serve formal notice demanding debt conversion into majority control. A flurry of heated arguments erupted around the boardroom table. Margaret raised 2 fingers, and the voices instantly fell silent. Is there a formal cure period? 72 hours following the formal demand. Daniel answered. During that window, the board can vote to adopt an independent restructuring plan and demonstrate the financial capacity to cure the default. And we have that plan, Emily stated firmly. Victor closed his eyes for a brief instant. You let me walk onto that stage completely blind to all of this. I tried to tell you. After 4 days of filtering what I was allowed to hear, because on my very first morning, you fired a director who brought you both a problem and a solution. Everyone in this building learned the rule immediately. You were my executive secretary. Your sole duty was to keep me informed. And your duty was to allow people to speak the truth. Victor rose to his feet. Do not turn your calculated choices into my fault. I take full ownership of my part. I was cowardly when I put the real truth in the second folder. But you never eliminated the problems in this company. You only eliminated the people brave enough to warn you about them. Nobody moved a muscle. Victor looked around the room, from the board members to Mason, and down at the sea of documents covering the floor. When his gaze returned to Emily, his voice was deathly quiet. The trust between us is permanently broken. Hand your badge to Human Resources and clear your desk. Margaret closed her copy of the report. Victor, we are not finished here. She reports directly to me. This decision is entirely mine. He turned his gaze toward Daniel. And you are suspended immediately for gross insubordination and unauthorized access to proprietary financial files. Daniel unclipped his security badge. There is no need to suspend someone who is already walking out the door. Think carefully before destroying 23 years of your career. Daniel laid his badge flat on the mahogany table, but kept the brass key secure in his pocket. I am thinking about those 23 years for the first time in a very long time. Out in the hallway, June stood waiting, holding a cardboard box packed with Emily's few personal belongings. Resting on the cardboard lid was a fresh mug of black coffee. I thought you said the coffee was all gone, Emily murmured. It ran out for certain people. June handed her the box. My mother used to say that blame always searches for the lowest chair in the room. Emily attempted a faint smile. Was that really your mother? Yes, she knew far too many bosses. Emily placed her keycard on the reception desk. Then she opened the empty green folder and left it lying beside the badge. Here is the very last piece of good news I have to offer Mr. Langford. He will never have to listen to me sugarcoat the truth again. The elevator chime rang out. Daniel stepped inside, carrying his own cardboard box of personal items. Emily looked down at his empty lapel. You didn't have to do that for me. I didn't do it for you. She raised an eyebrow. That sentence could use a little polishing. I am choosing between staying silent and working alongside someone I genuinely believe in. The second option happens to be you, but the choice is entirely mine. Emily stepped into the elevator beside him. Daniel stood close, making no effort to erase the heated argument, the looming uncertainty, or the quiet kiss in the library that still hung unanswered between them. When they reached the ground floor lobby, the grandfather clock struck midnight. Margaret's phone rang. Meridian just officially filed the demand for corporate takeover, she said, catching up to them right before the glass front doors. And Vanessa called a major press conference for 3 days from now. Margaret handed Emily an official copy of the corporate bylaws. If you truly know how to save this hotel chain, you have 72 hours to prove it. Emily had 72 hours to save a company she had just been fired from. Her new corporate headquarters had no executive mahogany desk, zero enterprise IT access, and not a single chair that matched another. It featured 4 industrial commercial dryers, and one of them beeped periodically even though nobody had turned it on. Margaret had authorized the emergency use of the decommissioned basement laundry facility at the Fulton House, a boutique property 5 blocks from headquarters. Shortly after midnight, Emily and Daniel had slipped through the service alley entrance, carrying 2 cardboard boxes and a dog-eared copy of the corporate bylaws. The room occupied the deep basement. Stacks of folded bed linens filled the metal shelving. Empty laundry carts blocked half the hallway, and an old sorting table served as the master command desk. Daniel pushed a heavy canvas basket aside. I've worked in far worse executive suites. With 4 commercial dryers, none of those other offices had this level of immediate feedback. The machine beeped. Emily glanced over at the control panel. At least someone agrees with your assessment. She spread the bylaws open on the table and used a dry erase marker to write 4 bold headings on an old chalkboard hanging on the wall. Truth, solution, Owner, deadline. Daniel read the list in silence. No dedicated column for good news? If it is genuinely true, it will fit into the first column. The heavy fire door swung open, and June pushed her way in, steering 2 rolling carts loaded with bankers' boxes, thermoses of hot coffee, and deli sandwiches. "How did you manage to get all of this out?" Emily asked. "Right through the front doors. Unlike the executive suite, they actually open when someone pushes." June surveyed the exhaustion etched into their faces. "When was the last time either of you slept?" "Does that question help save the company?" Daniel asked. "It helps prevent our recovery strategy from being drafted by 2 sleep-deprived people having deep conversations with laundry equipment." The machine beeped right on cue. June pointed a finger at the control panel. 3 hours of mandatory sleep. We begin work at 5 sharp. At 5:10 in the morning, Emily returned to the basement to find 6 urgent messages waiting on her phone. By 6 o'clock, there were 23. Before 8, frontline employees from 12 different properties were transmitting raw incident logs, rejected operational proposals, and paper trails of structural crises resolved without corporate authorization. June operated with a phone pressed to each ear. "Speak directly with Miss Carter. No corporate buzzwords, no sugar-coated summaries, and do not apologize for stating hard facts." She clicked off one line and answered the next. "My mother used to say that the only people who truly understand a hotel are the ones changing the towels and taking the guest complaints." Emily looked up from her laptop screen. "Was that your mother?" "No, she never worked in hospitality, but she would have made an extraordinary general manager." Daniel rolled a laundry cart up to the chalkboard. "First truth, 400 corporate room bookings were canceled last week." Emily wrote briskly. "Solution. Re-engage the accounts with loyalty discounts tied strictly to future minimum night stays, rather than discounting baseline room rates across the entire property portfolio. Owners, on-site property general managers, and regional corporate sales leads. Deadline, 36 hours to secure signed letters of intent." The industrial dryer let out a sharp beep. Daniel drew a chalk line under the entry. "Formal approval from the Industrial Laundry Committee." Before noon, a comprehensive turnaround plan was taking shape. Reopen the 4th floor in Cleveland, phase the structural work at Harbor Point, restructure delinquent vendor payment terms, and migrate off the emergency server without interrupting online bookings. Every single workable solution originated from a frontline employee who had tried and failed to submit it up the corporate ladder before. A front desk receptionist provided direct contact information for the 3 major corporations eager to book in Cleveland. A headline cook organized a coalition of local food distributors willing to resume deliveries on net 7 payment terms. An events coordinator recovered the complete guest rosters for the 400 lost corporate reservations. Emily looked across the sea of paperwork. They were never out of good ideas. They were out of leaders willing to listen to them. Daniel replied quietly. The heavy basement door opened once again. Leah Brooks walked in nervously, clutching a thick audit binder. Thomas Keene stepped in right behind her, carrying a desktop tower and cables. June placed a hot mug in front of each of them. "I invited the sentence Mason refused to let finish, and the director he fired before listening to the solution." Thomas lifted his mug. "This is the warmest welcome I've received since my security badge was deactivated." "Don't get accustomed to it," June warned. "Coffee distribution is strictly tied to moral character and daily availability." Emily turned to Leah. "Back in the executive records room, you tried to tell us who issued the directive regarding the Lake Shore budget diversion." Leah laid the spreadsheet flat on the table. "It was Mason. He ordered the renovation logged as fully completed and diverted the funds to mask the cash flow deficit." "Why did you hold on to the paperwork?" "It was part of my monthly internal audit packet. My job was to verify the authorization and sign off. I refused to sign." Daniel pulled his chair closer. "Is there anything else?" Leah handed over a sequence of printed email transcripts. 6 weeks before Meridian purchased the defaulted debt, Mason ordered me to upload our internal cash flow projections to an external virtual data room. "Meridian's data room?" Emily asked. The server was registered under the name of an independent consulting firm. The named recipient was Vanessa Cross. Thomas plugged his desktop tower into an open-wall outlet. The enterprise server maintains transmission logs even when someone deletes an email thread. My termination didn't erase the archive. Daniel glanced over at him. You were fired. You didn't step down. I'm experimenting with comfortable translations. I hear they do wonders for one's career. The server log confirmed the exact date, timestamp, sender, and recipient. In the attached file, Mason had shared monthly cash covenant targets, default forecasting models, and the exact minimum capital required to buy out the debt. Another file was titled Day 1 Plan. Emily opened it. 9 hotels were slated for immediate liquidation within the first 6 months of Meridian taking control. The Fulton House appeared on the 3rd line. Lake Shore was 5th. Harbor Point was 7th. Beneath the property names were projected asset sale valuations and the elimination of over 1,800 jobs. The basement laundry room fell completely silent. Even the commercial dryer ceased its beeping. June removed her glasses and read the liquidation roster a second time. They referred to human beings as headcount reductions. They classified livelihoods as avoidable overhead. Leah answered softly. Emily turned the document toward Daniel. Vanessa never wanted to manage the hotel chain. She wants to strip the real estate assets and shutter the rest. A housekeeper appeared in the doorway carrying a bundle of fresh linens. Her eyes drifted to the screen, catching the name Fulton House. This hotel too? Emily didn't close the file. This one too. My daughter works the front desk. My husband handles building maintenance. We have been here for 17 years. Emily pointed toward the chalkboard. Then we need every single dollar this hotel can recover, save, and generate over the next 2 days. Without hiding a single number, the woman set the linens on a shelf. I'll go get the general manager. In less than an hour, the Fulton House submitted its own recovery proposal. The property occupied an older building with high utility costs, but held corporate lodging contracts with 2 nearby medical clinics and could easily convert its vacant basement space into an executive micro-event center. At 7 in the evening, Emily's phone rang. Victor Langford. Daniel saw the caller ID and stepped back from the table. Emily answered. Mr. Langford. My administrator access to the executive financial portal has been restricted. Mason referred to it as standard transition protocol. That is a comfortable way of telling you that you no longer control corporate decisions. On the other end of the line, Victor drew a slow, heavy breath. Tell me we can still reverse this. I am not going to tell you what you want to hear. Then tell me what actually happened. Emily looked at the 4 columns on the chalkboard. She told him everything. The debt acquired in secret, the altered financial summaries, the breached covenants, and the 9 hotels marked for liquidation. She told him about the frontline staff who had been transmitting operational solutions all day long, and about the comprehensive turnaround plan taking shape in the basement. Victor didn't interrupt once. When Emily finished, he remained silent for several long seconds. Keep going, he said quietly. That is the full truth so far. When you uncover the rest, keep speaking all the way to the end. He ended the call without offering thanks. Daniel walked back over to the chalkboard. That was the longest conversation I have ever had with him without hearing that bell, Emily said. Perhaps he is finally discovering that silence and control were never the same thing. Shortly after midnight, June, Leah, and Thomas stepped out to retrieve the final property records. Emily remained in the laundry room with Daniel, surrounded by worksheets taped to the walls and 4 dryers now obediently quiet. When all of this is over, you might realize you walked away from your career out of loyalty to a company that failed you, she said softly. You're still trying to make my choices for me. I'm trying to understand if what happened in the library was because we were exhausted, terrified, or simply trapped in the same hotel. Daniel pulled the old brass key from his pocket and set it flat on the table between them. I want that answer too, but not while you need me to save this company. Emily leaned her hands against the table. And afterward, when you don't need me anymore, I will ask you the exact same question. Which question? Daniel slipped the key back into his pocket. You'll have 48 hours to imagine it. Emily's phone rang before she could reply. Margaret had forwarded the master directory of institutional creditors and debt holders who had to vote on the independent turnaround plan. The evidence could remove Mason. To save Langford, Emily would have to persuade the very investors Victor had spent months hiding the truth from. Emily had 48 hours to save Langford. The institutional creditors gave her 15 minutes. Vanessa needed only 8 words to attempt to destroy her credibility. Fired secretary attempts takeover of hotel chain. The headline flashed across mobile screens at 7 in the morning. Directly beneath it, a press release issued by Meridian described Emily as a disgruntled former employee lacking financial authority and driven by personal resentment. June read the article all the way to the end. At least they acknowledge you are attempting to take over something. On Monday morning, Victor wouldn't even let you take over the room thermostat. Is that supposed to cheer me up? No, that is what coffee is for. In the basement laundry room of the Fulton house, Emily divided the emergency recovery strategy into 3 distinct battle lines. First, halt the debt conversion on the grounds of gross conflict of interest between Mason and Meridian. Daniel wrote briskly on the chalkboard. Second, negotiate a temporary standstill agreement with the institutional creditors. Third, stabilize daily hotel operations without shutting down entire properties. We mothball unprofitable banquet areas, reopen revenue-generating guest rooms, and protect frontline staff and local vendor supply chains. Leah placed 9 signed letters of intent on the table. We successfully re-engaged 37 of the canceled corporate accounts. 9 have already agreed to reinstate their master booking contracts, provided our reservation system remains stable. Thomas swiveled his desktop monitor around. The enterprise server infrastructure can be fully deployed in 20 days. Until then, I can maintain the temporary server with 2 mirrored backup copies. June pushed a metal laundry cart between the tables, collecting signed employee affidavits. Front desk receptionists, line cooks, maintenance technicians, housekeepers, and assistant general managers. 0 corporate fluff. Each person wrote the raw root problem who was notified and the exact steps they took to solve it. The laundry cart began emitting a persistent electrical hum. Daniel searched underneath for a power switch. What does it want? Attention. June replied without missing a beat. It spent far too many years working near executives. Daniel pressed 2 toggle buttons on the side. The hum grew noticeably louder. You promoted it. Before noon, 3 Langford board members received lucrative executive employment offers from Meridian. 2 stopped answering Margaret's phone calls. A third forwarded a copy of the recruitment package to Emily with a desperate plea that his name remain strictly confidential. Vanessa wasn't just acquiring distressed debt. She was buying total silence ahead of the creditor vote. At 1 in the afternoon, Mason sent a direct text message to Daniel. Coffee at Meridian Grand. 15 minutes. I can restore what you threw away. Daniel showed the screen to Emily. Do you want me to go? I want the choice to be entirely yours. He pocketed his phone. You're learning. The lobby cafe at the Meridian Grand featured floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the river. Mason was waiting at a secluded corner table far from the other patrons, an unsealed manila envelope resting in front of him. Daniel set his phone face up on the table. This conversation is being audio recorded for my personal notes. If you object, I walk out right now. Mason looked down at the device. I agree. I have nothing to hide. That saves us both time. Mason slid the envelope across the table. Executive Vice President of North American Operations. Double your current base salary, a guaranteed 3-year contract, and complete operational autonomy over all hotels that remain open. Daniel didn't touch the envelope. In exchange for what? In exchange for ceasing to lend your professional reputation to Emily Carter. So the primary deliverable is my silence. The primary deliverable is saving your career. And what is your personal deliverable? Mason laced his fingers together. I remain on board as Chief Financial Officer throughout the corporate transition. There is a substantial financial bonus once the debt conversion is finalized. Did Vanessa guarantee that payout before she bought the debt? Vanessa required verified financial data. Victor had turned any negative forecast into an immediate career-ending offense for whoever presented it. Which is why you sent our proprietary cash flow models 6 weeks before the acquisition. Mason didn't bother denying it. I made the outcome predictable. Langford was never going to survive under Victor. 9 hotels will not survive under your plan either. Keeping every single property open is emotionally satisfying and financially reckless. Liquidating real estate is easy. Leading the human beings who work inside those buildings takes actual effort. Mason pushed the envelope forward once more. Think about the title. Daniel stood up from the table. I have a pre-existing condition that Meridian would never agree to, which is? I asked questions after page 1. By 3:40, Daniel was back in the laundry room with the audio recording, the manila envelope, and the first direct link connecting Mason's payout to the debt conversion. At 4 o'clock, the institutional investors' video screens lit up along the linen sorting table. Margaret appeared in the main conference window. Miss Carter will have 15 minutes. Following that, the lender syndicate representatives will decide whether to entertain a temporary standstill agreement. Emily began without a green folder, without background music, and without a single soothing phrase. Langford cannot meet its debt service obligations under current operating conditions. Occupancy is down, capital improvement projects are frozen, essential vendors are awaiting overdue payments, and the enterprise reservation system is running on a temporary patch. One of the lead institutional bondholders leaned toward his camera. You personally authored memos that categorized these exact failures as expansion opportunities. Why should we believe a single word you say today? Emily didn't look away from the camera. You shouldn't believe my words alone. I tried to protect my job, and I ended up shielding the wrong executive culture. The industrial laundry cart behind her began to emit a persistent electrical hum. Daniel dropped to one knee and pressed the side toggle switch. The noise continued unabated. Emily pressed forward without missing a beat. That is why every single figure in this recovery model is tethered to an original field work order, a field-tested operational solution, the specific name of the employee who executed it, and a verifiable milestone timeline. The electrical hum grew louder. On screen, a creditor representative furrowed his brow. Are we experiencing a technical interference? Emily glanced over her shoulder. Daniel was now kneeling beside the cart, holding 3 disconnected wires that led nowhere. It is an operational reminder from our current headquarters. It believes in active committee participation. June draped 2 heavy bath towels over the electrical unit. The buzzing was reduced to a muffled purr. Continue, Margaret said, her expression entirely unreadable. Emily presented the 3 operational pillars. She showcased properties capable of generating positive net operating income without mass layoffs, the signed corporate group letters of intent, the weekly restructured vendor agreements, and Thomas's enterprise IT deployment timeline. Then she displayed the liquidation list of 9 properties Meridian intended to shutter. Vanessa's model generates quick cash by stripping real estate assets. Ours generates recurring top-line revenue by restoring functional hotels. What is the standstill duration requested? A syndicate attorney asked. A 45-day forbearance window, paired with weekly transparent milestone reports and third-party oversight of operating accounts. And who leads this turnaround? Margaret answered immediately. An independent operating committee led by Emily Carter. The lead investor turned his attention back to Emily. The former executive secretary? The former regional operations manager who listened to frontline employees when senior leadership refused to quaver. She answered. The title I was assigned was far smaller than the operational expertise I brought with me. The 15 minutes expired. Nobody hung up the call. Following 23 minutes of rigorous cross-examination, the creditors outlined 3 non-negotiable terms. The immediate termination of Mason, the stepping aside of Victor from active management, and board confirmation of Emily as interim recovery lead. If the board ratified those terms before the deadline, the lenders would grant the 45-day standstill. The video feeds clicked dark. For several moments, nobody in the basement laundry room spoke. The cart let out a muffled hum beneath the towels. June tapped its metal side. Not now. The grown-ups just won around. Daniel waited until the others stepped out to transmit the signed files to Margaret. I have never admired you more than the exact moment you stopped trying to appear polished. Emily closed her laptop. I still haven't answered your question from the library. Daniel set the brass key flat on the table. I haven't asked the question yet. Then let me give you an advance preview of the answer. He stood right in front of her. The kiss was not a mistake. Daniel opened his mouth to reply, but Emily's phone rang. Margaret Langford. Emily answered immediately. We secured the creditor's conditional support. With strict conditions, Margaret replied grimly. Victor refuses to step aside for management. He termed the turnaround plan a hostile coup to seize his family's company, and he just pledged his board votes to support Vanessa's takeover. Are his voting shares sufficient? Combined with his family trust shares, they are decisive. To save Langford, Emily needed the vote of the very man whose executive chair she was being asked to occupy, and Victor had just promised that vote to Vanessa. 7 hours remained until the final deadline. One floor below the boardroom, Meridian's media relations team was setting up television cameras and media backdrops for a live press conference to announce the takeover of the hotel chain. Upstairs, Emily walked into the boardroom, carrying a bold red binder and facing a decisive board vote stacked heavily against her. Daniel looked down at the binder in her hands. Red? June removed every single green folder from the supply closet. A symbolic decision? According to her, basic accident prevention. Does the clasp work? Emily gripped the binder with both hands. Let's not test it. Margaret occupied the head of the boardroom table. Victor sat to her immediate right, the small golden bell positioned before him. Vanessa and Mason sat on the opposing side, flanked by corporate counsel and 2 board directors who had received lucrative employment offers from Meridian. A wall display showed the syndicate representatives of the institutional creditors waiting for the board's decision. Margaret gestured toward the empty chair. Miss Carter, present the plan. Vanessa let a subtle smirk touch her lips. Since when does an executive secretary present a corporate restructuring plan to the board of directors? Emily set the red binder firmly on the table. Ever since being a secretary gave me the opportunity to listen to receptionists, line cooks, maintenance technicians, assistant managers, and frustrated guests, the exact people this executive suite stopped listening to years ago. She opened the first page. There were no soothing headers about growth, possibilities, or strategic alignment. There were raw numbers. Langford breached its financial cash flow covenants. The enterprise reservation system remains on a temporary patch. 46 rooms at the lake shore are shut down. Harbor Point has construction work halted. Primary vendors are demanding overdue payments, and 9 hotels will be liquidated if Meridian takes control. Victor looked down at the property liquidation list. Emily pressed forward. We also have 9 signed letters of intent from corporate groups, restructured weekly payment agreements with key vendors, a 20-day deployment timeline to install our new enterprise server, and localized property turnaround models capable of saving all 9 hotels. Plans drafted by unauthorized frontline staff. Mason scoffed. Solutions engineered by experienced frontline professionals. Emily corrected sharply. Executive authority was the very barrier that stopped anyone from listening to them. Leah laid the audit dossier directly in front of Margaret. Thomas connected his computer to the central display. These enterprise server logs demonstrate that Mason transmitted our internal cash projections and default timelines to Vanessa 6 weeks before Meridian purchased the distressed debt, Thomas explained. Mason took off his glasses. Stolen digital files acquired by a terminated employee with no authorized clearance. System logs preserved by the company's enterprise backup and authenticated during an internal investigation authorized by the chairwoman of the board. Thomas replied calmly. Daniel set his phone in the middle of the table. And this conversation was recorded with Mason's explicit verbal consent. Daniel's voice projected clearly through the conference speakers. This conversation is being audio recorded for my personal notes. If you object, I walk out right now. Then came Mason's unmistakable voice. I agree. I have nothing to hide. The audio advanced through the offer of the North American executive post, Mason's retention as chief financial officer, and the substantial bonus tied directly to the debt conversion. Finally, the room heard the exact phrase he had uttered in the cafe. I made the outcome predictable. Mason slammed his laptop shut with a loud crack. A commercial negotiation taken entirely out of context. We have the full 15-minute recording, Daniel said. including the section where you attempt to purchase my silence with double my salary. Margaret turned her gaze directly onto Mason. Did you disclose confidential corporate data prior to Meridian acquiring the debt? I took proactive steps to protect the remaining shareholder value of this company. For whose benefit? Mason offered no reply. Margaret called for the first formal vote. The two board directors who had received recruitment offers from Meridian were formally barred from voting due to conflict of interest. The board voted to remove Mason from his post, mandated the preservation of all financial ledgers, and stayed the debt conversion pending the completion of the independent audit. Mason gathered his glasses. Stripping my title does not create capital. No, Margaret answered, but it prevents you from deciding who gets to take it. When Mason walked out of the boardroom, Vanessa remained firmly seated. A board suspension can only last so many hours. Meridian's legal foreclosure rights remain active if the creditor's standstill plan fails to pass. That is why we are still in this room, Emily said. The heavy mahogany boardroom doors swung open and June walked in, steering the metallic laundry cart from the Fulton house overflowing with cardboard boxes of signed affidavits. The same industrial electrical unit from the basement was strapped to the side, draped under two white bath towels. A low, muffled electrical hum accompanied the cart's progress across the executive carpet. Daniel looked at the cart standing in the middle of the boardroom. It came along? It requested to represent the laundry equipment without voting rights. June answered, entirely unfazed by the stunned looks of the board members. June handed the stacks of declarations to Margaret. Frontline employees from across all 27 properties documented when they alerted headquarters and the solutions they executed. Nobody was promised an executive promotion. Some received only coffee. Vanessa thumbed through the first box. Frontline testimonials do not make a secretary into an executive leader. June adjusted her glasses. Job titles merely dictate where a person sits, not how much value they possess. The laundry cart gave a distinct hum beneath the bath towels. It agrees, June added. Margaret opened the creditor's restructuring document. The second board vote will approve a 45-day debt standstill, remove Victor from day-to-day management, and confirm Emily Carter as interim chief executive officer for a term of 12 months. Victor touched the golden bell with the tips of his fingers, but did not ring it. If I vote in favor, I lose my family's company. Emily closed the red binder. No, you lose the executive chair. If you vote against it, your family loses the entire hotel chain and over 1,800 people could lose their livelihoods. And you take my place. If the board so decides, with public performance milestones, weekly third-party oversight, and the full power to remove me if I fail to meet them. Do you truly believe you can do better? I believe I will start by listening better. Victor looked at the video display of the syndicate creditors, at the cardboard boxes of employee affidavits, and at the golden bell that remained silent on the table. My father treated every mistake as unpardonable weakness. I spent my entire career trying to prove I never made one. Margaret took off her reading glasses. And you forced everyone in this company to maintain that illusion for you. Victor nodded slowly. I thought silence meant absolute control. It only meant everyone was terrified of me. He turned toward the assembled board. Emily tried to warn me before I signed that contract. I shut the report and rang this bell. Mason exploited my weakness, but the failure was entirely mine. Vanessa leaned in toward him. Victor, Meridian can still preserve the revered Langford name. A name is not preserved by shuttering the very places that gave it meaning. Margaret called for the vote. The initial votes were split down the middle. 2 supported Vanessa. 3 approved the independent restructuring plan. Only the Langford family trust shares remained. Victor rested his hand over the golden bell one last time. Then he withdrew it completely. I cast my vote for Emily Carter's turnaround plan. On screen, the lead creditor representative signed the 45-day standstill agreement. Margaret announced the formal outcome. The debt conversion is stayed. Victor Langford is relieved of management duties. Emily Carter is appointed interim chief executive officer for 12 months. The metal laundry cart parked in the corner of the boardroom let out an electrical hum so loud beneath the towels that every single director turned to stare at June. She whipped off the bath towels. Now it can celebrate. Vanessa rose to her feet. This board just handed an iconic hospitality empire to a secretary with 4 days at this company. Emily remained seated. You handed the turnaround to an operations executive with years of experience and 12 properties ready to work alongside her. You confused my badge for my worth. An aide hurried into the room and whispered urgently into Vanessa's ear. Down in the ballroom, press cameras were already broadcasting live in front of a giant stage backdrop that read, "Meridian acquires Langford." Vanessa snapped her portfolio shut. This decision will be challenged in court. Put it in your report. Emily answered. 20 minutes later, a monitor in the executive corridor showed Vanessa standing before a room of reporters. The announced transaction remains under regulatory review, she stated stiffly. Behind the media stage, 2 maintenance workers were using razor blades to peel the word "acquires" off the vinyl banner. June watched from the hallway. 8 letters. Finally, a corporate reduction I can fully support. Victor was the last to leave the boardroom. He paused in front of Emily and laid the brass master key to the CEO's suite on the table. Don't let that chair convince you that the room revolves around it. That is the very first piece of advice from you I intend to follow immediately. He offered a faint, tired smile. Good luck, Miss Carter. You will need some too, sir. Down the quiet corridor, Daniel was waiting by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Do you have any good news? He asked softly. Emily stopped directly in front of him. I have a truth. Even better. I'm in complete shock. Daniel pulled the brass room key from his pocket. That is the first genuinely useful piece of operational data you've given me all week. Why? Because now I know you don't need someone to make decisions for you. You need someone who will stand right beside you while you make them. Emily rested her hand over the key in his palm. Then she lifted her eyes to his and closed the distance between them. She kissed him. Daniel took her hand, and the kiss unfolded without hurry, without any corporate folder between them, and without a single truth waiting out in the hallway. When they parted, Emily's fingers were still resting over the key. Was that the answer? Daniel asked with a gentle smile. That was the part that could never fit inside a report. Margaret appeared at the far end of the hallway and waited until they both looked over at her. Then she stepped forward and handed Emily the official key to the chief executive office. Pushing the double doors open, Emily found the small golden bell sitting on the polished mahogany desk and an engraved brass plaque mounted on the wall behind it. Good news only. She unscrewed the plaque from the wall and tucked it into the bottom drawer of the desk. The golden bell remained on the desk, completely silent. 6 months later, the very first person to bring bad news into Emily's office was the man who used to fire anyone who dared to do so. Victor walked in at 8:03 in the morning, holding a red binder in his hands. He glanced warily at the small golden bell on the desk as if it might suddenly report him. The restoration of Harbor Point is 12 days behind schedule. Emily set her pen down on the desk blotter. Is that the comfortable version? No. The comfortable version stated that the master construction timeline was receiving a historic update. Daniel, seated at the far end of the conference table, covered his mouth with his hand to suppress a laugh. Who drafted that phrase? Emily asked. I did, Victor admitted sheepishly. I deleted it right before walking through the door. What is the root cause of the delay? The primary masonry contractor failed to perform to specifications. And the proposed solution? Victor opened the red binder. Split the remaining scope between 2 local contractors, retain the current specialized crew, and deliver the first phase within 5 weeks. The budget increases by 4%, but the main dining room can continue hosting private functions. Emily cross-checked the cost schedule. Then she reached out and tapped the golden bell a single time. Victor squared his shoulders instinctively. What does that signify now? That you brought a real operational problem, an actionable solution, and sufficient runway for us to execute. That is solid decision-making. So I'm not being dismissed? You aren't even employed in active operations. Daniel lowered his hand. She remains technically accurate. Victor closed the binder. Ever since stepping down from the executive suite, he had been spearheading the brand's historic property archive project. He signed no operational expenditures, directed 0 staff, and had no personal bell on his desk. It was by far the safest compromise Margaret had ever negotiated between Victor and the rest of humanity. The weekly leadership meeting convened moments later. Thomas, fully reinstated as Chief Technology Officer, delivered the opening briefing. The enterprise server went live on the 18th day. 2 mirrored backup systems, real-time monitoring, and 0 lost reservations since the cutover. Leah, now head of internal audit, presented the second report. The formal legal inquiry confirmed the gross conflict of interest. Meridian formally withdrew its debt conversion filing, and the institutional bondholders converted our temporary standstill into a 3-year debt restructuring facility. And what about Mason? Victor asked. He remains fully detached from the company, and the civil investigation is proceeding through the appropriate regulatory channels. Leah answered. Daniel stood before the master property status display. All 9 hotels remain fully operational. The Lakeshore reopened its 46 guest rooms. The Fulton House will inaugurate its new lower-level event space next month. And at Harbor Point, we just received our first official piece of bad news. Victor looked over at Emily. Did he truly need to add that last part? He did, she replied with a grin. I am beginning to thoroughly enjoy not missing executive meetings. Daniel advanced to the next screen. Of the 400 canceled corporate bookings, 287 have officially rebooked. Local corporate accounts have filled the majority of the remaining open dates. Emily gestured to the motto permanently painted across the top of the whiteboard, Truth first, solution after. This policy does not require the employee who discovers a crisis to already have it solved, she said. It simply requires that no one ever hides the truth. After that, we find the solution together. That was how Langford returned to true profitability. Not because every single executive report became pleasant to read, but because operational failures began arriving while there was still plenty of time to solve them. Daniel had returned as Chief Operating Officer following a formal search conducted by an independent board committee. His personal relationship with Emily had been formally disclosed to the board of directors, registered, and recused from all compensation and performance evaluations. June regarded the corporate disclosure as proper, albeit hopelessly incomplete. The compliance form fails to ask who steals whose coffee mug, she grumbled one morning. Because that is not board business, Emily replied. June eyed the mug cradled in Daniel's hands. Not yet. That evening, frontline staff from across every property gathered in the grand ballroom of the Grand Langford to celebrate 6 months of successful turnaround. Emily's father sat right in the center of the front row. He had navigated his own way inside, turned down 3 separate offers of physical assistance, and personally straightened the brass reserved placard bearing his daughter's name. It's crooked, he remarked as Emily walked over to him. The name placard, or your impartial assessment? The placard. My assessment ceased being impartial the day you learned how to walk. Emily adjusted the card in front of him. Did you travel all the way here by yourself? I spent 4 years relearning how to handle my own life. I certainly wasn't going to make you late to your own executive appointment. He took hold of her hand. Those 4 years never erased anything, Emily. Daniel has been trying to convince me of that for months. Her father looked past her toward Daniel, who was laughing with Thomas near the edge of the stage. He seems like a thoroughly reasonable man. Don't encourage him. Margaret called Emily up to the stage. The operating performance report for the first 6 months showed sustained occupancy growth, fully normalized vendor accounts, and all debt restructuring milestones met ahead of schedule. Frontline staff who had participated in the turnaround effort would receive equity profit-sharing bonuses. Margaret waited for the standing ovation to subside. The board of directors has voted unanimously to confirm Emily Carter as permanent chief executive officer of Langford Hotels. Emily looked out across the grand ballroom. There stood the dedicated people who had answered emergency phones through the dead of night, protected a bride's wedding, retrieved buried inspection tickets, and transformed an old basement laundry room into a corporate recovery command center. When I first joined this company, I was taught that bad news could cost a person their job, she said. Today, our rule is different. Nobody will ever be penalized for pointing out a problem, and nobody will ever have to solve it alone. Victor watched quietly from the side of the stage. Emily continued. True optimism is not about concealing what might go wrong. It is about looking directly at the truth while there is still time, and believing that together we have the power to do something about it. Following the applause, Victor stepped onto the stage without an executive title and without a prepared speech. I created a boardroom where everyone smiled because nobody felt safe enough to tell the truth, he said. The choices were mine. The consequences were mine as well. I offer my deepest apologies to the people I tried to silence and to those who lost opportunities because of it. He did not ask for his executive chair back. That was the exact reason his apology rang true. June waited at the bottom of the stage steps and handed him a fresh mug. He looked down at the coffee. Does this signify that I am redeemable? It signifies that you completed 6 months without ringing that bell to interrupt anyone. And after this? Don't ruin your progress by asking far too many questions. Later that evening, as the grand ballroom began to empty out, June caught up to Emily near the exit. My mother used to say that good news isn't the kind that merely comforts you today. It is the kind that remains true tomorrow. Emily smiled. Did she really say that? She did. I saved one genuine quote for the very end. Daniel met Emily in the winter garden where they had saved that wedding on their very first day together. Delicate string lights illuminated the trees, and an intimate table for two had been set beside the glass windows. I have terrible news, he said solemnly. What happened? Our dinner reservation across town was canceled. Emily looked down at the candlelit table. And what is the optimistic spin? I will simply have to have dinner with you right here. That sounds like a remarkably suspicious translation. Daniel pulled out her chair. Then let me open with the unfiltered truth. He set the old brass key on the table between them. Back in the laundry room, I promised to ask a question once you no longer needed me to save this company. I remember. The library happened because we were exhausted and worried, but I kissed you because it was you. Emily met his gaze without looking away. Is that the question? I'm still drafting the report. A radiant smile broke across her face. Daniel drew his chair closer. I love you. I don't want to manage your life, control it, or make choices for you. I want to build a life right beside you, if that is your choice as well. Emily picked up the brass key and closed his fingers gently over it. I love you too. And that is the very first important answer I never had to rehearse. Daniel glanced around the table. No green folder? Emily kissed him softly before replying. The best news never needs any translation. And perhaps that is the most important part of this story. Because you may never have to save a chain of 27 luxury hotels, yet you may have felt underestimated. You may have set your own dreams aside to care for someone you love with all your heart. You may have tried to start over, only to find that some people saw only the blank space of time that had passed, rather than everything of value you learned during it. Emily's journey reminds us that competence never vanishes just because it is put to use outside an office building, and that true optimism does not consist of denying what is broken. It consists of facing the truth, while there is still time to shape what comes next. If you ever find yourself believing that your greatest opportunities are behind you, remember, starting over never erases the distance you have already traveled. Everything you have learned remains alive inside you, and the right door can still open. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth, and tell us in the comments, have you ever had to start a chapter of your life over again? The end.